This is a video that will illustrate the latest functionality of SwiftCOUNT with Freshbooks using an iOS device for capture. So the first thing I did is that I went to try it free and I filled the information. So now I got an email that that gives me a password. So I'm going to do a first login. I'm going to start from scratch here. So the first time I log in, I have to go through a short wizard just to make sure that I do everything. So continue. I have the option here to download the app. It'll just send me the links. Here I would either enter my credit card number, or I can just put in, if I don't want to include it, I can have it free for 40 days, so I'm going to do that. I can schedule an appointment with a Count coach. I'm going to skip that, and that's it. I'm done. I click on complete. So now I'm ready to get started. I have a little icon here that basically shows me instructional videos on everything, and if I open it, I can actually watch the video. Once I'm done and I click OK, got it, it's going to show me that this video has been watched. So as long as not all the videos have been watched, this little icon will be here. I can always close it and it'll come back until I've watched all the videos. So I'm going to close it for now. And it always is available from the activities tab here. This is all my video here, and these are more information. We have a YouTube channel. This is how I add users, and so on. The first thing I want to do when I first start, because the password is a little bit complicated and I've already copied it to my cache, I'm just going to go ahead and change my password to make it a little easier, especially to log on to my mobile device. So what I did is I went on to user, and from here I can just click on change password. The current password is the one that I had already copied. I'm going to put a new password that I can remember. The password has to have at least an uppercase and a lowercase, a number, and a special character. Okay, and I can save it in my browser. So now I have the app ready and I have a password. That'll be a little easier to log in. So let me just log out and I will log back in. Okay, I'm ready to go. One more thing I'm going to do before I actually start, because I have somebody else testing with me here. I'm going to go to settings. I'm going to create a couple things. First of all, I'm going to create another user for testing. Okay, so now I have my two users. The only other thing I want to do here, I want to create some Swift IDs. So what the Swift IDs are tags. So they allow me to tag anything, movements, counts, and I will get back to that as well. But for now, let me just create them and then you will see how I use them. So for example, I'm going to do a switch ID called an order. I'm going to add one and call it a PO. I can give it a different color. And the last one I'm going to do is I'm going to call it a transfer. So that will allow me to keep track of my items, whether they came in on an order or a PO, or if I just moved them from one place to another. Okay, so I'm ready to start. So basically right now, if I go to my hub, the hub is just an overview of the application, just shows me what I have. Right now there is nothing, and if I wanted to, there is a couple of videos that we can watch from here to see the program in action. Those are just YouTube videos. If I go to my products, currently I have no products. So I have a few options as to how to enter product. One of them is to go to product integration, is where I would upload or I would connect some products, whether it's from an Excel file or an accounting package that's linked. So what I can do from here is I can download a template. It will basically be a simple Excel template that I can download to re-upload item. But if I'm connected to an accounting package such as Freshbooks or QuickBooks or Xero, I don't need to do that. I can get the items directly from the accounting package. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to go to this little icon here is integration. So for this video, we're going to integrate to something called Freshbooks. It's exactly the same process if I was with anything else, but the only difference is each one has its own particularity as to how to connect. So let's go ahead, click on integrations. So Freshbooks. Now we only integrate with FreshBooks Classics because FreshBooks Modern does not have inventory. So I only need two pieces of information. One is a URL and one is a token. If I go into FreshBooks, I can look in my account and I can see a tab called FreshBooks API. The FreshBooks API is the one that has those two pieces of information. So I can just connect here and paste. So now that I'm connected, it's giving me a few different options. So import product, export movements, export counts. So just before I do that, I'm just going to explain briefly what movements and counts are, so that it's basically the core of the application. On the application, we have the ability to do physical count, and I'm going to show you how we do that using a mobile device and the desktop, the cloud-based desktop. And movements are just the ability to have products come in and out and tag them accordingly. So I'm going to leave that here, but I'm also going to say export products created in SwiftCOUNT. So what this extra little check does is it will allow me to have any product that is created in SwiftCOUNT go back to FreshBooks. So that may not be something that everybody wants to do, so that's why by default we leave it unchecked. But if you want to leave it checked, it's completely up to you. And then we can also assign a tag. So I'm just going to do a tag for FreshBooks so that I know anything that came from FreshBooks, and I'll give it a color as well. So this is similar to the other tags that I've created. This is just one that will give me the option to have a little bit of information. Those tags really don't hurt anything. The more you have, the more you'll be able to filter and report on them. And then I click finish. So now the platform is going to show me that I'm connected to FreshBooks. Currently we integrate mostly to accounting packages. We're just in the process of having some additional integration to online shoppers. Those will be on the next release that will be in a few weeks. So now that I have an integration to FreshBooks Classic, I no longer need to import my products from Excel. As long as I have my products in FreshBooks, I can then get them. So the key is to be able to import the products. So if I click on products integration, it's actually going to go and sync my data with FreshBooks. And this actually does two things. If I had products in FreshBooks, they'll come into SwiftCOUNT. But by the same token, if I create products in SwiftCOUNT, they'll actually be pushed back into FreshBooks as well. So now that I've done that, I can see all the information that came in from FreshBooks. And this is the same data that I have, for example, that I am number 100 here. If I look in FreshBooks, now one thing that's important to realize in FreshBooks, items have to be trackable in order to be inventory track. So item 100, I have on hand 197, and my cost is $80. If I look in FreshBooks, it's showing me my current stock is 197. The quantity in FreshBooks, I'm just assuming that this is a quantity that you ship by, but the actual stock is this here. So now if I make a change in SwiftCOUNT, it's going to reflect in FreshBooks and vice versa. So now that I have some products, let's go ahead and do some transaction with them. So for example, the first thing that I can do, so I can actually look at the products by clicking on view, and that will give me a closer look into the product. I'm able to see the part number, the cost, the on-hand quantity. I also have a little icon here that will show me what location it's in. So because we actually brought it in from FreshBooks Classics, we created a location called FreshBooks Classics, and I'm going to show you how that can be moved to different locations as well. We also have a unit of measure for it. We can create multiple units of measure. The idea, those are created in the settings, and the idea of having multiple units of measure is to have the ability to have more than one UPC code for a product. You can have a secondary unit of measure, for example, a case of 12 would have a unit called 12 with a conversion factor of 12, so that whenever I scan a case barcode, I would then be able to automatically add 12. But that's a little more advanced, so we won't go into that right now. So those are the units of measure. And right now, if I look at the bottom here, I would be able to see all the movements, and because we just started, there are no movements for it right now. So before I do movements, I'm just going to create some locations. So location is basically physical places where that product could be stored. So right now we have two. When we set up SwiftCOUNT automatically, it has the SwiftCOUNT location, but because we imported everything from FreshBooks Classic, we've actually moved everything into the FreshBooks Classic location. Again, this is just fictitious, just to tell us where the information came from. And the idea to do it based on FreshBooks Classic is if we had additional integrations such as Shopify or anything else, we'd be able to have another location. So if we wanted to assign items to a specific vendor, we could do that. But we can also assign items to a specific physical location. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to create a new location. I'm going to call it, let's say we want a location called Kitchen, for example. Save and new will allow me to create another one. And then we have another location called Bar. So if I'm in a restaurant, I have a kitchen and a bar, I can have different locations. So those locations were created, and obviously the locations are created with no items because they're basically brand new. I can assign items to locations, and the idea of assigning items to location is to limit the locations where the item can be available. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to just pick a couple items. And I'm going to assign the items to those locations. So even though I don't have, it's already in FreshBooks Classic. So even though I don't have inventory, by assigning the item, what I do is I actually give the ability for somebody who would be able to see those locations to see those items. Because one of the things that is extremely powerful in SwiftCOUNT, and I'm going to just show you that briefly, is we can assign specific items, specific locations to people. So if I had somebody working in a different area, like for example, if I had a barman that was only working in the bar, I can make sure that he only sees the location that's at the bar. So if I go to my profile, under the user permissions, I have the ability, because I'm the main user, I don't need to edit myself, I have access to everything. But the new user that I've created, I can actually edit his profile. I can remove access to a bunch of items. So access means he can do everything, he can see everything. Action means he can see and do. So if he doesn't have action, he can see but cannot do. And then on the location tab, I have an additional piece of optional thing here where basically I can remove access. So by default, everybody gets access to all the locations. But if Joe never had anything to do with the kitchen, I can actually remove the kitchen from Joe. And then no matter what he does, he will only see the products that are in the location that are assigned to him. So even if he had multiple items, if we had the same item in multiple locations, he would only see the ones that are in the location that have been assigned to him. So this is a fairly new, very powerful feature that we've added on the latest version. So let's go ahead and do a quick count. So to do a count, I go to the count module. So basically I want to update the inventory of this item here. So I have 197. I want to physically go and count how many I have. And I'm just going to do it for one item, but it works for any item basically. So if I create a new count, as soon as I create the count, I give the count a name because we can have multiple counting at the same time, multiple counts going on at the same time. I give it a target date when I want to complete the count. I select the user. So by default, it's going to select all the users, but I can remove the users that I don't want counting on this specific count. And then I can either count all my items, I can count by categories, or I can have a custom count. In this case, I'm going to do a custom count just for the one item. And I'm just going to pick this item here. So I'm basically telling the system I just want to do a cycle count for that item. I could have done it for more items. We can also do it by category. Now, FreshBooks does not recognize categories, so we didn't categorize our items. But category is just an additional way of being able to just identify what the items are. So I'm going to go ahead and continue my count here. And continue. The screen before was giving me the option to create a count that recurs. I'm not going to do that for now, and then just click create. So now my count is done, and the idea is I'm able to go onto my mobile device. So this is my mobile device. I put in my username and password, same as the one that I created on the portal with the new password that I've changed. Click on login. And now when I go in, I see my movements from here, I see the counts, and I see transfer. So for now, let's just go to the count. So the only count that I have is the one that I created here. I tap on it, and I see the item. So if I had multiple items, I could have used the barcode scanner to actually scan a barcode. I can also create a sort, so if I have multiple items, I can put any criteria that I want, and it'll just filter the items that I count. And the reason it's important to filter the item is that that would be the order in which you will count. So because I only have one, if I hit start SwiftCOUNT, it'll basically go and just show me the one item. So when I go into my one item, I have a few different things here that are important to notice. Number one, I can select the location where I want to count it from. So by default, it's going to be in my Freshbook location because this is where it was created initially. But if those items are in the kitchen and I'm just doing the count, I'm actually going to count them in the kitchen. Freshbook doesn't really care where I count them from. Freshbooks just cares about the total here. But let's go ahead and count them in the kitchen, and I'm going to count 200. So what I did here is that I just tapped on the 200 here. This is a keyboard that's designed to have the idea to just do a one finger touch. So I have my thumb on the left side here, and I'm able to tap those numbers. If I prefer, I can tap on the little calculator in the middle, and I have a full calculator that I can have. And I can have a combination of the two. Or I also have a little slider that allows me to go up and down. So if I was counting like a bottle, I could be actually figuring out approximately what the level is. But I'm going to just count 200 to keep it simple. And now once I'm done my count, I can just swipe from left to right to accept it, or I can click on the little checkbox here. I'm just going to swipe. So basically, because I only have one product, it's now giving me the option to complete the count. Now, if I had it in multiple places, I wouldn't complete it, and I could have multiple people counting it in different places. But in this case here, I just want to complete it. So I click on complete. So once it's completed from here, I just go back to the desktop, and you can see on the desktop now it says complete. If I want to view what I've counted, I'm able to see that I had 197, and now I have 200. So if there was a mistake, I could do a recount. This is the recount. I can reassign users if I want to. But if everything is good, I'm just going to click on process count. So the idea of processing a count is just to say, I'm done, I want to update whatever. I want to update my accounting package, basically. So what it's going to give me here is going to give me a quick discrepancy report. And here it's going to show me by location. So in the first location, I didn't have anything. So it's actually not doing anything. In my Freshbooks location, it's removed the 197 that were there because I didn't count it. And in my kitchen location, it's actually put in the 200, but I can see that my net change is only the 3. And then when from here, I can also export it to Excel or to PDF. When I close this, it's actually going to go through and update my inventory. So this is done here, and what it's done is it actually created an update in SwiftCOUNT, so I can go back now and view what I have on hand. So now this I have 200 on hand. And if I go back into FreshBooks and just refresh my screen, I can see that my stock has been updated in FreshBooks. That's really all there is to do in terms of, this is really the idea, is to be able to alter your stock based on what happens in QuickBooks. Sorry, in SwiftCOUNT. So if I go back to SwiftCOUNT, some of the other things that I can do here, I'm just going to go a little bit faster here because I know it's taking some time. But the idea is that I want to be able to, for example, let's say I want to just move items out of the warehouse. I'm going to create a movement. So that's actually done directly from the mobile. I'm going to go back to the mobile. And the difference, so on the mobile, I've already looked at what the counts were. I also have the ability to do transfers or movement. All the transfers do is they just move items from one point to another one, so they don't really affect your accounting package. So if I go to transfer, I'll see my item, I'll see all my location, and I'm able to decide what do I want to move from my location. And it's going to show you the location, even if I don't have any items on hand. These are the items that were assigned to this location. But I'm not going to do a transfer because I want to show how it affects FreshBooks. So instead, I'm going to do a movement. So when I do a movement, I basically go into the movement, and here I'm going to see all my products. Same idea here, I could actually scan a barcode, or I can put a description here. I can also put a filter on it. So by putting a filter, it'll filter on anything, on the code or on the description. So I put 100, so it's basically showing me the 3 items that do have 100. So if I wanted to do a movement for all those 3, let's say somebody is picking them up and I want to sell them, I can just scan them out, or I can just go ahead and do a movement. So to do the movement, all I have to do is tap on the first one, and it's now ready to go through all 3 and cycle through. So before I do a movement, I can actually decide, and I apply a tag as to why I'm doing movement. So in this case here, I'm actually going to sell these. So I'm going to tab on the little tags here, and that'll give me an option to select one of the tags that I have. So in this case, somebody is picking up an order, so I'm picking the order. I can also have a comment for each tag, so there's a little tab here that allows me to have the comment. So here I can actually put my order number, and then I tap on the top here to get rid of the keyboard, and I save it. And one thing I can do once I've saved it, I go back, and here I have a little lock that's unlocked by default. If I tap on the little lock, it actually locks it so that all my movements going forward are going to have that tag. And where that's important is if you're shipping an order with more than one item, it's good to be able to just assign them a tag and then go through. So let's say we're going to have 2 of each of these items that are going to be sold on this order. So I tap on one twice. So it's asking me, is it a minus or a plus? So the difference here, again, a movement could be an in or an out. Because it's an order, it's going out, I'm going to tap on the minus. I'm going to do 1, 2 for the minus. Same idea here. It's going to do the 2, and now it's going through the second item. Because I put a filter of those 3 items that had 100 in them, it's going through the 3. Again, I could have used a barcode scanner and do them one at a time, or I could have put any kind of filter just to go through. So again, I'm going to do 2 of this one. Okay, so in this case here, it's not letting me move it because the location that I'm telling him to take to doesn't have it. So I have to pick it from my default location. And it's actually important to make sure that when you move it, you decide where you're moving it from. And this is done by tapping on the from. If it was a plus, you would have another little icon here, which would ask you where do you want to put it. So again, I'm going to take it from. So I've just done my 3 products. So basically what happens when I do a product, it actually goes through and it marks the movement. It doesn't affect them right away. It actually creates them because we want to be able to report on them before we go through. So I can see now that on the first item here, I had 200. Now I have 198 available. If I look at this item here, I had 100, I have 98 available, and then the other one is somewhere. I can actually do the same thing here, just filter by part number, put the 100, and now I'll see exactly the same thing that I had. All those boxes, by the way, are searchable. So you can put any filter or combination of filter anywhere here and find the item. So I can see my 3 movements. If I want to see why I only have 198, I can click on it, and it's going to show me that there is an outstanding movement. So the movements actually will get processed as soon as I click on process movement. But typically what we recommend is before you do that, you might want to go to a report and click on unprocessed movement, and you'll be able to see all the items that have not moved yet. So let's go ahead and process that movement. So again, if I look at this item, I'm just going to look at one of the items in Freshbook. It only has 2 right now. As soon as I complete my movement, then it will affect Freshbooks and reflect what's gone out. So this is a good way to manage your inventory as it comes in and out. So this is a one-way going from SwiftCOUNT to Freshbooks. And I'm going to do another one going from Freshbooks to SwiftCOUNT, and you'll see how that gets affected. So now that I've processed my movement, the movement is no longer pending here, and my inventory has been updated here. And if I look in Freshbooks again, I can see that my stock has been affected. So this is one way going up to Freshbooks. By the same token, if I was to go ahead and create an invoice or manage or modify my inventory in Freshbooks, the next time I do an integration, not a movement, the movement basically will push what you've done here. If there was some changes, it would actually pull them as well. But if I do a stock product integration, which is basically just syncing my 2 systems, then my inventory would be adjusted back into. So what this one does is it'll update the inventory that's in Freshbooks. What this one does is actually a 2-way integration where it's going to bring back anything that's been done in Freshbooks, and it's going to push everything that's been done in SwiftCOUNT. So that's how we manage the movements. The idea of the transfer is exactly the same. The only difference is it wouldn't affect Freshbooks because we would have the different items, we would have the visibility within SwiftCOUNT of what the items are. So let's go ahead and do a quick transfer just to illustrate what I mean. So if I want to do a transfer, I can go to transfer. Same idea here again. I can pick the location where I want to transfer from. So let's say I want to move some of those items. So that first item that I put them all in the kitchen, but let's say I need some somewhere else. I need some in the bar, for example. So I can scan again or pick this item, and then here it's showing us from the kitchen. Now we want to know where are we going to put it to. So it's showing me the locations that have been assigned to this item. So I want to move it to the bar, for example. And then all I have to do is just put in the quantity. So I want to put 25 to the bar. I want 26. Again, I would have to put 25 and 1. Let's say 26. Again, I have my little calculator here. And when all is good, again, here actually I can put a tag. So I'm actually going to tab this as a transfer. And I'm going to put a comment that this is a transfer. Now in this case, I'm not going to lock the little keyboard, so it'll only apply to this. And then I click on this, and basically it's going to go back and now update my inventory. So again, it created a movement, but this movement has no impact on FreshBooks because it's a lateral movement from one location to the next. But we still have to process it just to make sure that we have visibility. And now again, it didn't change my on-hand quantity. So now that I've completed the transfer, if I just wanted to see where my items were, I could go to locations, or I can just go to view my item. And here the number hasn't changed, I still have 198. But now when I click on it, I can see I have 172 in my kitchen and I have 26 in my bar. And so now if I had a user that only had access to bar, like the one that I created before, he would only see this and he would be able to move only this. He wouldn't be able to affect this at all. So that's where it becomes very useful to be able to monitor different locations. So if you have multiple locations and you wanted the head office to be able to see all the different physical locations, and you wanted the users at each specific location to only see what they are, that's where you could use SwiftCOUNT completely. So I've created a movement, I've created a transfer. One more thing I want to show from here, and then I'm going to go show you some reports and I will be done. So one of the things that we have in from our hub is the ability to create products on the fly. So when we create products on the fly, it basically creates item from the product tab. From the products listing tab, we actually have something called a Swift lookup. So what a Swift lookup is where you can scan any barcode and it's going to do a search in a database that has over 100 million items, and if it is found, it's actually going to create it in SwiftCOUNT. Let me show you how this works. So for example, if I wanted to add an item to my SwiftCOUNT and FreshBooks, I could just take an item for which I know the UPC code. I could scan this item directly into that field here, which is what I'm doing here, and then click on go. And then what happens is it actually will make the call, find the item, find all the information. I can even add a category on the fly here. I can put a cost, and I can even put a reorder point. Now again, that's another thing that FreshBooks doesn't support, but some other accounting package like QuickBooks and Xero do. So that would be useful to use. So now that I've created this item here, I can actually remove heat here, and there is my item right here. It actually created with the UPC code as a part number, and obviously there is no inventory here. So what I could actually do is I could do a movement. So the movement you can do from the mobile, or I can also do a movement directly from the desktop. If you wanted to just adjust inventory of an item, I can quickly go and say, yeah, I've got some that are coming in, and I can decide what location I want to put it into. So by default, it's going to go into the default location, but I want this to go in my bar as well because we need Coke in our bar. So let's say we receive 10. And okay, so what I've just done right now is I've actually added an item from a UPC code, created the movement to put it in, and now I'm actually going to finalize the movement by just clicking on process movement. So now I have this item. I had 10 available because I have created the movement. Now I have 10 on hand. And what I can also do is I can just now go to product integration and sync my products with FreshBooks. Updated before, but it actually added this item to FreshBooks. So if I look, now I not only have this item, but I have the cost, I have the inventory, I have everything that I've done in SwiftCOUNT is now existing in FreshBooks. So one way to populate FreshBooks is just to do everything in SwiftCOUNT and then send it to FreshBooks. So we're almost done here. I apologize, it's taking longer than I thought, but that's good. If I go to Analytics, I can now see that these are all the movements, these are all the transactions that I've done today. This basically monitors the movements. So Analytics has a few different views. So you can do an overview of your movements. So if I click on here, I can see all the movements that were done today. I can also see the counts that were done, and that's basically on a 12 rolling month, so I can see the counts. But if I go back to my movements, I have an overview or a detail view. And what the detail view allows me to do is it allows me to put a date range, allows me to find any products. So the Analytics is where you'll be able to go and find anything that you've done on movements, based on dates, based on criteria, based on tags, everything else. So that's going to complete the tutorial for today. The only other thing that we have, just very briefly, is we have the ability to print labels. It's pretty basic, but you do it from here. You can print labels for your products or for your locations. And then now that we have a little bit of information, we can go back to the hub, and the hub is just basically giving you a snapshot of what you have going on. So I hope this was useful, and please feel free to email us if you have any questions.